Thank you for that introduction. I'm still getting the hang of these, let's see. Oh, that's not what I want you to see first. This is up. Okay, hold on, we're almost there. Easier said than done, John. There we go. Okay. While I am not a trained preservationist, I am a practical one. I have been spending the last 40 years of my life preserving pieces of architectural history, primarily through salvaging builders' hardware and lighting and plumbing fixtures, fireplace mantles, built-in cabinetry, doors, and windows. I believe it is crucial that we salvage and reuse as many building materials as humanly possible. The video behind me is an example of materials that are left in demolition projects. And as you can see, there are door hardware that remains. This house is from around 1920 or so. Slide bolts, this is a 1930s paper towel holder. There's hooks. There's all kinds of, this happens to be probably a spice rack from 1940 in aluminum. There's all kinds of lumber in them, and these days lumber you can't even find today. Things as what seem as inconsequential as a strike plate that a lot of our customers come in looking for. There are hooks and other types of little pieces of hardware. And of course, usually the front door is always left, and this happens to be with the original hardware because they still need to be able to, you know, keep the people out who would rob the house. So, so there you have it in terms of just having an idea of what actually can be left in a demolition project, even though there's also some dangers in working in them. It's trying to get the demolition companies to actually let you in to be able to take those things out of there without breaking into the house and just doing it. I believe, you know, salvaging and reuse is actually much more environmentally friendly than new manufacturing. The next two slides are very, very detailed. They are in your packet, so you don't have to go ahead and take notes on this. The organizations as diverse as the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Trust for Historic Preservation both promote reuse and salvage. And here's a list of deconstruction and reuse benefits from the EPA and a similar one from the National Trust website. The salvaging and reusing building materials is also important for our humanity. In a 2017 Cambridge, researchers at Cambridge University declared that material things structure our lives. They enrich us, they embellish us, and express our hopes and fears. Historic materials tell us who we were and where we come from and who we are going to be. And a quote from Winston Churchill says, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." While salvaging building materials really isn't all that difficult, it can seem overwhelming and time inefficient. After all, it's much easier just to demo the whole thing instead of painstakingly taking a building apart one doorknob at a time and all the other salvageable materials that there are. But this really is a short-sighted view, because once you take out all the doorknobs and the lighting and the switch plates and the cabinet knobs and on and on and on, and they're removed, they can be reused. The time and money spent on salvaging is actually a net gain compared to the money and resources, again, involved in manufacturing or sourcing those new materials. So the benefits of salvaging and reusing historic materials are clear. So how do you as professionals convince renovation clients that doing so makes sense? Well, through the budget, of course. Money talks and we know what walks. The average 2,000 square foot home has approximately 4 exterior doors, 12 interior doors, 6 closet doors, which translates to 44 doorknobs and door plates, 22 mortise locks, and 22 strike plates. There are also the toilets, sinks, shower, and the kitchen sink, and then additionally, kitchens generally have between 25 and 50 cabinet knobs, and then there are the window locks and lifts and the lighting. using these salvage materials can be quite a cost savings over buying the new pieces. And you have to really compare oranges to oranges and apples to apples, meaning you can't compare vintage hardware to hardware that you're going to buy at Home Depot or lighting that you're going to buy at Lamps Plus. It's more like you have to compare vintage hardware to two of the most prominent hardware manufacturing companies today. One would be E.R. Butler out of New York, and another one would be Nance, who is located on La Brea, down the street from me, as well as E.R. They're also located in New York. So even if your client doesn't want to reuse any of the existing materials, there's still a way that they can be used to stretch the budget. You can have a sale right there at the property. You can have the buyers remove the items from the home themselves, thus saving on the labor charges, or in the case of demolishing the items, you save the room in the dumpster, which costs quite a bit. The fees are quite expensive. When I bought my current home, which is a 1950s home, it's a ranch, it had been redecorated in the 1970s. So this is what it looked like when I took over. And I sold the wall-to-wall carpeting to one guy who came and pulled it out, and I actually got $400 and plus saved all that labor. And the bars that you see in the window were removed by my neighbor, who ended up taking them and reusing them in another neighborhood. And at the same time, I actually got a call for a demolition for me to go to and pull things out of. That was in the Pacific Palisades. That was a phenomenal 1950s house. So those painted closet doors that you see ended up getting replaced by unpainted doors, along with the brass rail for it. And I mean, they're really beautiful. They were unpainted, and I ended up replacing those as well as lots of other items from that demolition to my project. In addition to this, there was also fans and shutters. This too all got bought up. And there's a 1970s kitchen that my neighbor bought and de-installed and took it and used it somewhere else. So that was really, it was great for me and worked. I made approximately $1,000, saved on all that labor to remove the items, and it felt great knowing that all these items were going to get reused instead of dumped and filling the landfill. You know, if a sale isn't a good idea, and you can hire a deconstruction company like the reuse people to come. They come to the site, they deconstruct the building, salvaging as many of the materials as possible. The option doesn't translate into cash in the pocket, but it does give you a substantial tax donation. Here's a chart that they created of actual appraised donation values in selected cities where they have conducted deconstructions. Once the donation value is considered, it can actually be most cost effective to have the house deconstructed than demolished. And here's an example of the reuses people hypothetical scenario of cost of deconstructing a 2,200 square foot house instead of demolishing it. The total costs of deconstruction are $24,338 as opposed to demolition costs of $10,100, which is just out of pocket, and that's it. But once the tax donation of $24,640 is considered, the owner actually nets $302 by deconstructing the house rather than paying the $10,100 to demolish the house. So if the project doesn't involve a complete deconstruction and the client isn't interested in using vintage materials, there can still be a monetary incentive to salvaging materials. Organizations like Habitat for Humanity Restores will accept donation of building materials. They do not come and deconstruct the house for you. That you have to hire people, but they will come and they will pick up. The donor will receive a tax donation, and the sale of the materials will help Habitat's work in the community. Habitat is particularly good for newer buildings. They like hollow core doors, vinyl windows, newer bath fixtures, and newer lighting, much more than they do vintage materials. A lot of them just don't pass code, and so they don't tend to take those in. The owner can also sell materials to retail outlets like this is Antique Hardware. Here's my little commercial, folks. This certainly isn't the way to fund the entire project, but it will help to defray some costs, and it keeps the materials out of the solid waste stream. Once the hardware is salvaged, it usually needs to be cleaned and repaired for its new life. There are as many, and there's, let's see, whoop. Sorry, folks, I'm going in the wrong direction. Oh, sorry about that. There's Liz's Antique Hardware. We have over 1 million pieces of hardware dating from 1860 to today. So once the hardware is salvaged, of course, it usually needs a new life and needs to be restored and so on. And so what we have to do is we have to determine what the metals are. And the way that we do that is by this little tool called a magnet. A magnet will stick to iron. It will not stick to brass or bronze or copper or zinc, aluminum, or pot metal. And if it doesn't stick, you really still need to figure out what that metal is, because it is contingent upon what it is and how we clean it. So if the magnet doesn't stick, you need to go ahead and scratch in a discrete area. And that scratching, by scratching it, you will see whether it comes up a reddish color or a yellow color, which means it will be brass or it will be bronze. And then you can go ahead and clean it like you would iron. And if it comes up silver, it's either aluminum or it's pot metal or zinc. And if you put those particular metals into a live bath, they are going to disintegrate. So we can do that with iron and we can do that with brass, but we can't do it. So what we have to do is we have to hand strip it. Whoop. And let me see if I can get that to, it kind of has a life of its own. So this is one of our staff people who is stripping. Sorry, yeah, I've got that coming up. I guess you can get the general gist. What he has to do is hand strip, and that's what he's doing here. And then after he hand strips it, he has to then rinse it, and then from rinsing it, because we don't actually polish and we don't actually want it to be shiny and brand new. We want it to still have an aged patina. He then goes over with a fine steel wool and retains that beautiful, rich patina that is still aged even though it's been stripped. I tend not to buy hardware that is in bad condition. However, I do get box lots, and often in these box lots, what happens is that there are broken mortise block pieces. I'll talk more about broken pieces later, but this is one of our staff people who is really falling in love with the repair of the mortise blocks. So here he is taking one apart. As you can see, it's got a lot of components. He's going to take this one apart and put it back together for you in about 1 minute. Usually what's broken is the spring that's on the latch. This is, like I said, from 1925, and he puts them back together. But, you know, in reality, the fixing of this takes about an hour or two for him to really get down, and often he has to custom make the pieces in order for it to continue to work. So what that customer ends up doing in terms of with what they do with things once they're cleaned and repair is really up to the client. As I've said, I'm much more a practical preservationist, and I tend to be a purist when it comes to using vintage hardware and lighting and so on. I like to go back into the buildings that of the same period, but that just isn't always possible. So these days we're seeing these vintage pieces being incorporated settings and applications, but you know, they actually bring a lot of charm to what is often a very, very sterile environment. Particularly these days as buildings are being demolished and then these boxes are going up. So even the most simplest of vintage hardware can really bring some depth to a contemporary setting. The next few slides are period applications. This is a iron latch that dates from about 1850. And this is an 1870s East Lake door hinge. This is an arts and crafts door lever, and the mortise lock that you saw being repaired is exactly what you need in order to make this function. And this is the Adamson's house in Malibu. This is a Spanish Revival, their Spanish Revival bathroom. This is an Art Deco doorknob and door plate, and this is a 1950s Eichler. All of these images were shot for a book that we published from HarperCollins Reagan Books, called Decorative Hardware. These next three slides are designers, they're designer projects that use vintage pieces and vintage hardware, but they are not original. And here's a kitchen in San Francisco that was made to look a bit more Asian. And this is a library. The 4 drop pulls that are in this picture are from 1870. And then these next 3 slides actually incorporate vintage hardware into into more designer type of objects, where they use doorknobs and door plates on a piece of salvaged wood and incorporated a hook into it. Here's a mobile of keys and a wall of salvaged doors. I think that really works. It's really nice. As I mentioned before, I end up with a lot of broken pieces from box lots. Don't think for 1 second that I throw those away. I do not. 13 years ago, I opened up an art gallery above my store called The Loft at Liz's. We do about 8 thematically based shows a year, and in fact, tomorrow night we open up our annual nature show, which we give away a lot of cuttings and seeds and so on and so forth. And the one after this opens June 22nd, is called Diverted Destruction. It's a found object assemblage show. So those broken pieces that come in all those box lots, I save throughout the year in my garage, and it accumulates along with my daily refuse. I ask artists to bring in, to create in the main body of the gallery pieces. This particular show, not only are we dealing with the medium of salvage materials and throwaways, but this year it's also become the technology edition. We started to name the shows and look for another theme within the medium. And that is because as we continue to move forward with technology, we continue to create more garbage. And so how do we leave it on the land in lieu of throwing it in the land? So this year's the technology edition. This opens on June 22nd of this year through mid-August, or I think August 18th or so. Here's an example of a sculpture from an artist who's actually going to be showing this in a show in the next couple of weeks. She came and got all of our half hinges. This is probably something that we get more than anything else, because as people deconstruct, they take off one half of the hinge, they leave the other half on the door or on the molding or what, or and then they don't put the hinge pin back in. So I end up with thousands of these every year. Well, she ended up creating this really interesting sculpture with that. Here's a detail of it, and she will be showing it soon in an art gallery in Los Angeles. What I do with all of those broken pieces is I create a installation in our projects room. And if I can get that to go, hopefully, let me push. There we go. So this is last year's rendition of what I do with all of those parts and pieces. I set up an installation in our projects room. This is available to anyone that wants to come. From the minute the show opens, people can take whatever it is that they want in order to be able to create assemblage art or whatever else they want to do with it. We also have 2 free workshops. Some are usually with kids, and then others to adults and adults come about the local agreements. It's really, this one's really a labor of love. I really feel that it enables people to be creative, and as I said, I mean, there's nothing else really you can do with any of these pieces, because they are completely either broken or they're missing parts. So I save those and give them all away. At the end of the show, I find a teacher and I give all of it to a teacher in order for them to take it to their students and for art classes. And then I start all over again every year. So I'm just about ready to do my next one. So that pretty much concludes what I wanted to say to you is that every single time you go to the garbage, that you actually are walking with the trash. There's almost everything that can be reused, from your wine caps to your bottle caps and so on and so forth. And thinking about where that belongs and how you can possibly save it for somebody else to use, or is being really a good steward of the environment. And I think that's what we're all trying to be here. So thank you. I would imagine you want to do that.
That's
after.
fine. Well, we're going to do questions now. Everybody.
Oh, all right.
Of Liz, if you have any questions. Yes, ma'am, in the back.